Hi, I'm Jim McGregor, one of the principal analysts here at Tirias Research, and I'm joined today by my colleague and friend, Kevin Krewell, and we're here to talk about the AI Hardware and Edge AI Summit. Now, that's changing names, just fair warning. Going forward, it's going to be the AI Infra Summit, so for AI infrastructure. It's morphed over the past couple of years. I think it's been around for what, 5 years, Kevin?
And something like that. It was pre-COVID. And it started off with the Computer History Museum with about 300 people. And it's now over 2,500 or about 2,500 people roughly
Now,
attend.
what we've noticed over time is this thing is kind of morphed over time. I mean, or especially in the early days, it was kind of focused on all the new products, all the new technologies for AI, especially
Right.
for
The
cloud
new
training.
startups at the time, Grok, Stambanova, Cerebras, they all presented even before they had, working silicon. They were presented at the conference.
But now it's really about what's going on in AI
Yeah.
and, really where we are. And it's a very good indicator of where we are with that. And I know that we were both attended Hot Chips a few weeks ago, and Victor Peng actually talked about that he expects these development of AI to go through these super cycles or waves, where
Mhm.
it's going to be focused on the cloud, then it's going to be focused on edge, and eventually on IoT or embedded devices. Where are we now, if you had to judge this from the AI from the summit?
Well, the summit was very much about really the cloud. Um, Even though the name was hardware and edge, it really was the infrastructure. So next year the name will be more appropriate. I know at IFA when you guys were there, it was about the AI PC, but the AI PC really didn't make much impact at this conference, even though AMD was there and Intel was there. But they were mostly talking about their data center chips and how they're doing in that regard. But the big presentations I thought that were most impactful at this conference came from Microsoft, came from Meta, both of which are talking in detail about their infrastructure they're building for a reliable AI solutions for the cloud. AWS was there as well. So it really talked more about that part of it, and but it was also the edge guys. I got lost a little bit in this conference. There were a few edge talkers. There were a few small companies talking about their edge solutions. One company is building software stack on top of Altera FPGAs. Maybe they'll go ASIC sometime in the future, but they wanted the flexibility. But they're only 21 people, so I don't think they're ready to build their own chip yet. So there were, but in the expo area, it was very busy. By the way, this took place in downtown San Jose at what was the old Fairmont Hotel, and it's now a Hilton property. And previously, I'd been at the Computer History Museum when it was only 300 or so people. Next year, they're moving to the Santa Clara Convention Center, which is a more mainstream, even a larger facility than the hotel, so they can grow the conference even more. So it was definitely a bustling conference, a lot of people there. The expo was busy all the way up until closing time. It was a 3 day, actually a 4 day conference because there was a pre-conference on Monday, uh, and it was the expo was bustling all the way to the very end of the on Thursday.
Now, you mentioned some really critical hyperscalers in that list with
Yeah,
Meta and Microsoft and, and
AWS.
Amazon. So what were some of the key announcements or key discussions, I should say, that
Well,
came out of this?
a lot of discussions from the hyperscalers were about reliability. They talked about how they have to build systems that, especially for training, if you start a training job and it goes for, days or even weeks sometimes, you don't want that thing failing through the process. So they talked about how they are uh, pre pre um, qualifying racks of servers. One of the highest failure rates is actually GPUs. The high Meta talked about how they use the leading edge GPUs, and one of their highest failure rates are GPU related. The second biggest one was actually HBM related, so they're doing a little more drill down in that regard. but these are high failure rates because they're high temperature, high
Mhm.
thermal stress. So they have to do a lot to manage those things. They have to be able to, they pre-qualify them. They actually did a whole thing where they pre-qualify, and if the rack looks really good, it goes into their training. If the rack looks a little iffy and their quality levels, it actually goes into some lesser workloads that are less reliant on long-term processes. So reliability was really big on him. The conversations came up about networking and photonics. A lot of people want to use photonics in the rack to save power, but there's still a higher failure rate on photonics than there is about copper. So that's still an issue because of the laser mostly.
Well, and the cost.
Well, the cost is higher. Although, I've heard some people said the cost was lower, but that didn't make any sense.
No, it doesn't make sense.
There were some conflicting stories. I mean, the Edge guys, I talked to a couple of the Edge guys and people related to the Edge guys, and there's still looks like a lot of the Edge guys are not getting traction at the in the marketplace. It's not really taking off. Edge AI startups, they still think the big guys are winning that story. And then, but at the same time, somebody from the Bosch investment group said that they're doing pretty well on their investments in Edge AI. So there might be a little bit of a discrepancy there, but certainly this conference was all about the hyperscalers. Other big trend, Microsoft they had for their supercomputer they built for AI. They had been using InfiniBand. Now they're moving to Ethernet, their supercomputer solution.
That would
So
be
everybody's
Ultra
going.
Ethernet, right?
Yeah, Ultra Ethernet has got a lot of traction. Broadcom is there talking about Ultra Ethernet as well. So that's a big deal for them. And then trusted computing was big for Microsoft. And the H100 from NVIDIA, and I'm sure the Blackwell as well, supports confidential computing. And that was a big important point for them as these workloads we call confidential AI, where some of the
Mhm.
workloads need to be protected while they're executing. So that's because you want to protect the models. The models are important and valuable, or the training data itself is also extremely valuable, and you want to protect that as well.
Now, you mentioned startups, and I know that we've seen a transition in some of the data center related startups like
Mhm.
Cerebras and Sambanova and the likes, and Grok, where they've even struggled despite having, competitive solutions out there in the market. So I know that they're transitioning to becoming service providers and building out their own data centers.
Correct.
Um, and you also mentioned, I believe, that Microsoft is increasing its spend by what, 30x or something like that?
Microsoft talked about how their ramp up in AI hardware has gone in just in the 6 months prior to May, because they left it at May, 30x from where they had been before. So that's
Wow.
their investment to build out the AI structure for Copilot PCs.
So obviously we know the
Copilot itself,
startups
actually.
are struggling and they have to, change their business model. Did any of the existing hyperscalers talk about how they're going to actually monetize this? Because I mean, Meta's giving away Llama. So,
Well, yeah, I know the monetization conversation did come up now and then, but there was one of the startup guys talked about economics, and he made a case that AI will make labor essentially free because you can replicate peop, the AI for labor. You can replicate labor using AI almost indefinitely, and that will lead to this huge economic boom. Now, I think everybody was pretty skeptical of his thoughts there. It was a little too simplistic, and not only that, but not all jobs replicate. But and my point has always been, hey, if you want an AI resistant job, become a plumber because AI is not replacing plumbers anytime soon.
well,
And people are always going to have leaky pipes, so that's always going to be a thing. Well, anyway, but uh, no, the monetization wasn't a big factor, but they were talking about the cost, and there was talks about how to manage power more efficiently in the data center. there was a panel discussion on uh, what are we doing about these carbon neutral commitments the companies are making and that are going to get broken by AI data centers. And it pretty much boiled down to, hey, use smaller models. That was, I mean, that was actually the only real solution I heard come out of that discussion was use smaller models. You don't need all the big models. You don't try to boil the ocean to solve every problem by running the biggest model possible. It doesn't have to do everything. But at the meanwhile, at the same time we were at the conference, OpenAI dropped their latest models, which are the other thing that's moving is agents. So we're getting these now the latest word trend and talking about AI and large language models is agents. So there's a lot of agencies.
Mhm.
But I will say one of the things going back to the startups, well, not so much startups anymore. They've been around for a while. The Grok, Samanova, Cerebus. Samanova was there and specifically started calling out their competitors and calling out Grok and Cerebus. Not even as much NVIDIA, but they were going after the other guys in their space, talking about how they can do a performance with one rack that the others take 3 or 4 racks to accomplish. So there's a little bit of squabbling now between those second tier guys. AMD's clearly gaining traction, moving up the stack. AMD had an interesting talk as well on their story in AI, all the way down to from the Xilinx FPGA Versal products all the way up to the data center. So they did embrace that kind of data center to edge discussion, and they're making good. Intel was there talking with Gaudi and Gaudi 2, mostly focused on Gaudi 2 because that's what they have today, even though Gaudi 3 is coming. And there were training sessions as well, and the AMD one sold out relatively quickly. And when we also say Qualcomm was there, I don't want to not mention Qualcomm. They had a really good talk about how they've taken the models to the edge and the process they've gone through to part of the quantization process and how they've built out their models to work on edge devices such as, well, in their case, smartphones and PCs. So there was a lot of really good talks there. Wasn't a lot of breaking news per se. There wasn't like a lot of new product introductions. So that's, maybe if you're looking for that, the newsy part of it, maybe not so much good news for that. But there was a lot of interesting moving the football forward, where we are today, and how things work together. Again, networking, data center, hyperscalers, as well as a little bit of the edge devices as well. So it was a very complete conference.
So very much in that first and kind of in the second super cycle. We're not
Yeah.
really a discussion around the whole embedded IoT at this point in time.
Now there was a little bit of embedded IoT discussions. Uh, Edge Impulse was there talking about their solutions on the software side, building on edge devices. So there was some of that discussion, but and they had some tracks about that. But I would say that the dominant message was about the hyperscalers and the data centers.
Okay. Anything that surprised you? Anything that kind of jumped out, or any predictions you think that came out of this
Well, I
conference?
was surprised by how much information the companies like Meta and Microsoft revealed about their building out their data centers and
Mhm.
building out the hyperscale AI solutions. They went into a lot of details on that. AWS also did it as well, and how they're doing. And one of the interesting stats on AWS, they said 96% of the AI ML unicorns, which are the bigger companies, run on AWS, 96%. And 90% of the Forbes AI 50 run on AWS. So that's pretty impressive. Even though AWS does not get as much discussion, they have a broad range of solutions, including their own Trainium and Inferium solutions. So I think that was very impressive. Um, And there was a few other, like you said, one other point that Microsoft made, they have NVIDIA, they have AMD MI 300s coming, as well as they have their own chip, which the Maya chip,
The
no,
Maya.
Maya is the Meta chip, actually. Meta talked about their Maya, but they also their chip. No, Maya is MAIA, is
Yes.
Microsoft. Yes,
Yeah,
that's Maya.
it's Maya.
So they talked about that hot chips, and now they also mentioned it today, but they didn't go into detail on it. But yeah, they're also providing their own solution as well as two mainstream AMD and NVIDIA. So that seemed to be a theme for most of the hyperscalers. They
Did
have
any
both.
of the hyperscalers talk about their balance between training and inference at this point in time?
No, that didn't. The biggest discussions on training was how difficult training still is and
Hmm.
how you have to design for 5 nines data centers, even if the workloads are 3 nines, in terms of reliability and uptime. So it was very much a discussion about keeping the uptime, keeping the power levels maintained during that time. How to do if you had a power glitch, how do you balance that out, and how do you shed workloads? I mean, it's very hyperscaler data center kind of discussions. But I think their key message was we're working really hard to make this reliable AI for you to build on.
Yeah. And we should note that, this is still early days because we're just now seeing kind of the emergence of the enterprise class data centers
Yeah.
adopting AI. So, I'm thinking that in future years, we're going to see more about that and have companies talking about enterprises talking about their experience in adopting AI in their data centers, which is a challenge when
Yeah.
most of the data centers out there can't handle the latest technology today because of the power and thermal limitations.
And that's where they're pressing the case. They just had a booth there. Dell actually, in terms of putting AI in your data center, Dell had a booth there as well, talking about their solutions. They had there were, in addition to the the normal speaker tracks, the keynotes, and then in the afternoon they split into 2 tracks. There was also a demo area that was next to the expo, and demos and events, or yeah, it was kind of a, I don't know what they called it. But it was a speaking track, but it was more informal. And
Hmm.
Dell did a takeover on that, so Dell was really pretty much in this conference. I mean, the biggest company missing, of course, was NVIDIA. And NVIDIA used to be at the early ones. And in fact, what they do is leave a speaking slot at the end of the sessions for NVIDIA. When all the last speaking slot was NVIDIA, because it would be a rebuttal of all the stuff people had said before about them. That was so it's fun because
Everyone's
yeah,
taking on NVIDIA, whether it's on the edge or whether it's in the cloud.
yeah. So at the end, NVIDIA would have its rebuttal.
Yeah.
But that was missing at this point. But NVIDIA wasn't the only target, and now I said, these guys are sniping at each other now. So, and again, the cloud guys embrace NVIDIA, but they also embrace their own silicon solutions.
Yeah. Well, and it's to the hyperscalers' advantage to have instances on multiple different technologies because
Yeah.
no two workloads are the same. So,
But not only that, but people have developers have preferences,
yeah.
and so they want to give developers different options.
Well, Kevin, I'm sorry I missed the event, but I'm glad you got to go. And
Yep,
thank you
you'll
for
hopefully
this.
get to go next year.
Yeah, I'll get to go next year. And thank
Next
you for
September.
this great recap of the event.
All
So,
right.
and thank everyone for joining us today.
All right. Have a good day.